Hello. It's often said that the game of football is in a downward spiral, but the same goes for the life outside the pitch. Those who were born 15 or 20 or even 25 years ago would be endlessly surprised to know that the idea of the European Super League among the big clubs was in the air a long time ago, back in the 1980s.
It was definitely a different time. 3.5 decades ago, the clubs were in the dark shadow of the national teams. Football in a time free of the World Cup final stage was a rare and unexpected guest on TV. Therefore, even the likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus had a small, sometimes simply measly income. But the appearance of Silvio Berlusconi in the role of AC Milan boss has changed a lot, if not everything in this regard. The legend tells that the Italian billionaire was furious and disgusted watching the Champions Cup game between Real Madrid and Napoli back in September 1987. The fact that two such mighty sides, let's not forget that the Italian club had Diego Maradona in their ranks, met so early due to a blind draw pretty much disappointed Berlusconi, who was also frustrated by the lack of media attention in the coverage of this event. Seeking a huge success on the international stage with his creation and rapidly getting to the top, the Italian at the same time wanted to make the club's football as good and expensive product as possible. In order to do it, he along with then Real President Ramon Mendoza started to push UEFA trying to change the system of Champions Cup. Both presidents were looking for a prestigious tournament where their respective clubs, along with the other giants of European football, would have a guaranteed place and could earn much more money, playing 15 or 20 additional games. Sounds familiar, isn't it? This idea was brewing for 2 years. Berlusconi and Mendoza pushed harder and harder, and eventually UEFA, in the form of the newly promoted President Lennart Johansson, approved some changes. Starting from the 1991-1992 season, the group stage involved the 8 winning clubs from round 2. The clubs were split into groups of 4, playing each other home and away, and the winning club from each group met in the Champions Cup final. Initially, it was an experiment, and it worked out pretty well, to such an extent that the tournament had been rebranded in 1992, got an official hymn, the one that became truly famous and magic, 8 permanent big sponsors, and a firm place on TV in the dozen countries, including those that had now their own clubs in the group stage. The revenues immediately skyrocketed. You can easily check it on the screen, but paradoxically, the number of those who were dissatisfied drastically increased. In the situation where only the champions of their respective countries were getting an access to the tournament, many big clubs had to wait for years. For instance, it took 3 seasons from Real Madrid and Juventus to get there. As for Inter and Liverpool, they were standing in that line even longer. On top of that, there was no secure place in the group stage even for champions. AC Milan, Barcelona, Manchester United, and so on were forced to play in 2 preliminary rounds, risking by an early elimination. On the other hand, battles with the low-key opponents at this stage of the competition didn't bring enough revenues and media attention because the group stage was a standalone type of tournament with own TV rights and sponsors. As a result, there was another revolution in 1994. Compared to the previous editions of the European Cup, radical changes were made to the format of the tournament. This year included 4 groups of 4 teams each in the group stage. The main thing, though, was that 8 clubs, including the title holders AC Milan and 7 best-ranked sides, received a bye to the group stage, while the national champions, ranked from 9th to 24th, entered in the qualifying round. The Romanian national champions were only allowed to participate in the UEFA Cup. From that view, the Champions League back at the time was even more private company than it is now. In exactly this shape, the competition existed for 3 years, and almost all this period there were talks, fierce political debates, and offers regarding a new format. One of the reasons was the reduction in growth of revenues. The other one, discontent of the major clubs that couldn't get to the tournament in the situation when only one berth has been available for each country. It looks odd and even preposterous, but back at the time in general, more important clubs and star players participated rather in the UEFA Cup than in the Champions League, and the reason was the format of competition. UEFA stoically held on for 2 years, but when in 1996 the notorious Jean-Marc Bosman's case broke barriers and opened unparalleled opportunities in front of the big clubs, the pressure from their side became irresistible. As a result, the Champions League has been expanded once again, this time up to 24 teams from the 1997-1998 edition of the tournament. This season was the first to have 6 groups instead of previous 4, which meant that only 2 group runners-up qualified for the quarterfinals as opposed to all the second-place teams. It was also the first to have 2 qualifying rounds instead of just 1. After 3 years of entering the UEFA Cup, champions of smaller nations returned to the Champions League. For the first time, the runners-up of 8 domestic leagues entered into the competition. But it was clear that it's only a step to even bigger changes. The new format didn't provide a huge leap in quality of play and especially in terms of revenues, so the big clubs continued to mercilessly pressurize and even blackmail Johansson and company, trying to increase the number of participants even further. Back in the late 1990s, only in Italy there were 7 truly rich and ambitious clubs, and obviously it wasn't not near enough for them to have mere 2 slots in the Champions League. Franz Beckenbauer, then Bayern's president, represented the interest of big European clubs and played hardball. In the early autumn of 1998, he teamed up with the Australian magnate Rupert Murdoch and proposed the conception of the European Super League, the closed tournament where the major clubs from Spain, Italy, England, Germany and France, the other countries would have had only few slots combined there, will play with each other and could earn 20-30 times more, courtesy to TV rights. It was supposed that all the games would have been broadcasted on subscription television. This threat profoundly concerned UEFA. One must say that Beckenbauer used all his considerable political weight, status and authority, and in October 1998 the organization accepted the changes. From that moment on, the strongest continental leagues have 4 clubs in the competition. The amount of games significantly increased, and the same goes for the revenues.
This format proved to be really viable. It would be fair to say that it lasted for more than 2 decades, although a few significant changes had been made. For instance, the group stage 2 had been abolished in 2003 in order to make a football season slightly less grueling. Also nowadays, the clubs representing the biggest national leagues in Europe got to the group stage directly and automatically, without risking to be eliminated by smaller opponents in the qualifying rounds.
The reason why the tournament had this shape for years and years is evident. Almost all the big clubs are participating in the Champions League each season, and if someone ambitious rich and powerful like Manchester United or Chelsea is missing one campaign or even two in a row due to poor performances, it could be fixed quite quickly without a huge financial damage. Let's not forget that the Spanish and English giants all are getting a lot of money in their respective national leagues courtesy to the expensive TV rights. But the pandemic completely changed, with this position catching off guard even those who used to earn a lot and easily. Without fans at the stadiums, all the major clubs lost at least one-third of their income, and at a certain point, situation went out of control, given that nobody couldn't predict when and how life will back to normal. There is no wonder that while 2 or 3 years ago only 3 big clubs from Italy, with their perennial financial difficulties, were eager to organize the Super League, now Spanish and English clubs also supported this idea. But Florentino Perez and company definitely didn't take into account one thing: the public's reaction. When in 1998 big clubs tried to leave the Champions League in favor of the virtual glittering tournament, fans also protested, but this time discontent was way more vociferous and global due to social media, not only important and powerful tool, but also a way to earn money for the big clubs. Also, it should be noted that the idea of Super League was undigested, hasty, and in a sense even reckless. For instance, it's hard to imagine the competition which is revolved on the best clubs without Bayern and PSG, but the truth is that Perez and Andrea Agnelli were rushing so hard they had no time at all for discussion with those who refused to join the project. At the same time, it would be too early to say that UEFA won on every level, despite the fact that the Super League visibly crumbled. It's apparent that there are a lot of debates and political confrontation in front, and the big clubs still have a serious weapon in their hands. Also, there is no doubt that Real, Barcelona and others will try to bide their time in the process, attempting to cut costs and salaries. You may see that it's almost a tendency now. Plenty of stars either have only a short-term deal or basically have no contract at all. It's significant that almost all of them will have to make some concessions. Sergio Ramos could stay at Real only if his salary would be lowered. Lionel Messi has more room to operate, but it would be hard for him to even retain the current monumental wage. As for Cristiano Ronaldo, in case he will leave Juventus this summer, which is feasible to put it mildly, he also will lose a lot of money in his next club, whoever it may be, PSG or Manchester United. So the big clubs certainly will find a way to survive, and at the same time they would try to pressurize UEFA once again in order to get any advantage. It seems the most probable outcome will be some kind of compromise between both sides. Let's assume that UEFA will move the change of Champions League's formula from 2024 to 2023. It's pretty much real. Let's imagine that the major clubs will receive a bigger share of revenues from TV rights and some annual payment for their historical achievements, by analogy with the Formula One. The other question, would it be enough? Well, in the best scenario, only for a moment. The truth is that this conflict will never end. It could take some other form, but the history will repeat, like it was many times in the past.